Section 13 of Orpheus with his Lute by W.M.L. Hutchinson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Bridal of Weeping Torches. The Delphian noble, having ended his story, inquired of the listeners whether it were not in truth the strangest they had ever heard, and when they all agreed that nothing could be more marvelous, he called upon Orpheus to redeem his promise. So the youth took his lute and sang that hymn in praise of Apollo, which he had heard the Muses chant on the night Thalia recounted the story of Leto's babe. Synarches listened entranced, and when he took his leave, he said, "Surely the god's own lute rings not more silver clear when he leads the chorus of the nine, nor can their heavenly voices be more honey-sweet than yours, young minstrel. May Apollo himself reward you for this fair tribute of praise." On the morrow began the festival, and Orpheus beheld with wonder and delight the solemn pomp of the sacrifice, the garlanded processions and chanting choirs, the white-robed throngs of worshippers, and all the splendors of the many-pillared fane. Now at noon was held the contest of minstrels in singing the praises of the god, and his priests sat enthroned as judges on the broad steps of the temple. Orpheus remembered the stranger from Delphi, and the desire took him to try whether his lute might bring him good fortune yet again, though his heart misgave him at the view of the multitude gathered round. Nevertheless, he stood forth last of the many who contended, and began to play a prelude ere he sang. But as the first chords rang out, a keen-eyed priest leaned forward and cried sternly, "Stay, stranger youth, tell me your name and country, and whence you had that flute in your hand." And when the lad had answered, rather with surprise than fear, the priest rose up and said in a terrible voice, "You have spoken falsely. There is but one such lute in the world, and it is one of the hallowed treasures of this temple. On the very day you say a stranger gave it you in the distant north, I myself beheld it safe in the secret vault wherein Apollo's wealth is hoarded. Ho, temple guards, keep the young minstrel prisoner while I go to search the treasury, but well I know I shall search in vain." Vain was the search in truth, and the priest came quickly forth again, rending his clothes and crying, "Sacrilege, sacrilege! It is Apollo's lute he holds. He has robbed Apollo. Let him die the death." Then wrathful faces closed about Orpheus, and swift hands tore the lute from his grasp, and the roar of many voices surged round him like an angry sea. "Sacrilege! Away with the accursed! Have him forth of the sanctuary, and stone him with stones!" But suddenly a woman darted from the temple. Like lightning she went past the priests, and down the steps into the raging throng, straight to the lad's side. The crowd fell back, awestruck, as from the coming of a spirit, and a reverent murmur rose among them, "It is the Pythia!" "In the name of Apollo," cried the woman, and unbinding a white fillet from her hair, she threw it round the neck of Orpheus, then went back into the temple as swiftly as she had come, followed by the muttering priests. Silence fell on the multitude. All eyes were bent wonderingly on Orpheus, where he stood dazed by the suddenness of these happenings. "You are safe, stranger," said one of the temple guards, touching him gently on the arm. "What it may mean, I guess not, but Apollo's holy prophetess has herself marked you inviolate. Know you not that the white fillet is the badge of the god's suppliants, they who come for sanctuary to his altar, whom to outrage is sacrilege unspeakable? Were your hands reddened with a father's blood, that sacred emblem would protect you. Nay, not a man in Delphi but would draw sword on any that dared molest you here." "That is a true word," said an old man among the bystanders, who seemed to speak with some authority. "But here is no question of bloodshedding. Our Lord Apollo has vouchsafed to pardon the offense of this young minstrel against him, heinous though it was. The lute is recovered, and for my part, friends, I know not why we stand here at gaze, wasting the hours we might spend in merrymaking. At these words, the crowd began to scatter towards the outward courts, where peddlers and sellers of fruit and of wine drove their trade, and Orpheus was left alone before the temple. He sat him down upon the marble steps and rested his head upon his hand. "I will not leave this place," he said half aloud, "until the god proves my innocence, for he knows I have spoken truth, though none would believe me, no, not one." And bitter tears filled his eyes at the thought of that disgrace. "Do not weep," said a soft voice. "There is one here who believed you, if none else did, and prayed that Apollo would defend the guiltless." Orpheus looked up and saw the princess Eurydice standing before him, attended by her handmaids. Her eyes met his, not fraught now with mystery and glamour, but with a heavenly pity. Her pale loveliness seemed at once more human and not less ethereal than his fleeting vision of yesterday. "Be comforted," she said again. "I have seen you saved as by miracle from a hideous death. Oh, my heart stood still at those dreadful cries. And surely he who sent his priestess to deliver you will make your truth clear as the noonday." The youth had risen, murmuring he knew not what broken words of thanks. He stood abashed by her queenly grace, touched to the soul by the simplicity of her kindness. Eurydice seated herself on the step above him and said, with the same frank gentleness, "My father is even now inquiring of the oracle how he may be healed of his long sickness, and I wait to hear what answer Apollo has given him by the mouth of the Pythia. If you will bear me company meanwhile, I should take a pleasure to hear your story, that I may tell it presently to my father, for he loves minstrelsy no less than I do, and I know he will be desirous to aid you. He has brought rich offerings to the temple, and it may be the priests will sift this matter more diligently at his request." Then Orpheus placed himself at her feet, and shyly at first, but gathering boldness as he went on, he spoke of his early longing to be a minstrel, of how he won the lute, and of the great hope that had come to him that he might sing a song not yet heard on earth, the perfect song. But something withheld him from telling her aught of the Muses, or that he was the child of Calliope. He said only that he was the son of a woodman, and had learned such skill as he possessed from certain teachers in the forest. The princess listened with earnest looks, and whenever he paused would draw him on to tell her more by some question that seemed to chime with his unspoken thought, so that the talk between them was like the talk of near friends for freedom and sweetness. But presently the old king appeared in the temple porch, leaning on the arm of a slave, and Eurydice flew to meet him. "What tidings, my father?" she cried eagerly. "What remedy has the Pythia bidden you seek for your healing?" "A strange one, my child," said the king, slowly descending the steps. Out of the inner shrine, from her golden seat of prophecy, she gave it as Apollo's answer that I should be whole and sound again if I betrothed my daughter to the first suppliant I should meet within his sanctuary. As he said this, his eye lighted on Orpheus, and he cried, "Behold, this is the man. I see the fillet of white wool about his neck." Now the king had not been present at the contest of minstrels, and knew naught of what had since befallen, having been carried into the temple by another way. Therefore he said to Orpheus, "What countryman are you, stranger youth, and what is your degree? Let me hear, I pray you, your name and parentage, and for what cause you are come a suppliant to the god." "King," said the lad, in a voice trembling with astonishment, "I am Orpheus, son of Oiagros the woodcutter, of the country of Pyrrha in the north." And no more could he say for very bewilderment. Then Eurydice gently took the word, and told her father all she had seen and heard but now. "Daughter," said the king, "if all this be so, it is plain Apollo's favor rests on this young minstrel. Yet he is no mate for you, being lowly born, and branded, moreover, with the reproach of sacrilege in the face of all Delphi, and of the concourse gathered from so many lands to this festival. Fear not, rather will I languish under my disease until death release me from suffering, than make you the unwilling bride of such a one. But Eurydice answered, blushing deeply, Say not unwilling bride, my father, that I cannot be to him whom Apollo has appointed. Nay, had the oracle declared I must lay down my life to do you good, you know your child would gladly have bought health and strength for you at that price. He is a churl's son, said her father angrily. The blood of a line of kings cannot mingle with his. Dear father, said the princess, have I not heard you say that the spirit within a man makes him what he is, that a king's son may be a churl at heart, and a slave harbor free and noble thoughts? As for the charge laid against this youth, I dare pledge my maiden honor that it is false. For look but on his face. He is no thief or temple breaker, and that will Apollo make known in his own good time. Modestly she spoke, but with a kindling eye and steadfast look. The old king, strangely moved, was about to answer her when the temple doors were flung wide, and the priests came forth in procession amid the blare of silver trumpets. They halted in the great porch, and a herald cried 3 times, Let Orpheus, son of Eurydice, hear the summons of the god. Then said the chief of the priests, Sound trumpets, and call hither all the folk, that they may likewise hear the truth that Apollo has revealed to us even now. So the trumpets sounded a gathering call, and the folk came thronging to the temple front. And in the face of all the multitude, the priest beckoned Orpheus to draw nigh, and solemnly restored the ivy lute into his hands. Then said he to the people, Behold, we make restitution to the minstrel of that which is lawfully his, albeit this is none other than the sacred lute of Apollo. Now hear a miracle. It pleased the god to appear of late in a mountain village of far Pyrrha, wearing the likeness of a traveler, and to be judge at a contest of minstrels. This youth did he crown victor, and gave him for prize this precious thing from his own treasure house, gracing Orpheus, son of Eurydice, with such honors as never mortal minstrel won before. Therefore it was that our Lord sent forth the Pythia to protect his chosen. And when we inquired of him concerning atonement for the deed of sacrilege, he bore witness for the minstrel by her mouth, and bade us restore the lute and proclaim him guiltless. Now praise ye all Apollo, Lord of unerring truth, and bring each man his free will offering to the great altar of burnt sacrifice, giving thanks to him who preserved us from shedding the innocent blood. Then the priests and their acolytes moved forwards with chanting and swinging of censers, and all the people shouted and flocked after the procession to the great altar in the midst of the court. But the old king motioned his daughter and Orpheus to remain beside him. He looked long at their young faces, both transfigured with grateful joy. At last he said, I little thought to betroth my child to a wandering minstrel. But who may contend against the high gods? Surely these signs and wonders are witness that this youth was born to no common destiny. Take the maiden's hand, Orpheus of Pyrrha, for to you I give her, and Apollo's will be done. So saying, the king joined their hands in token of troth-plight, and in the very act, What is this? He cried. I feel that I am healed. The burning fever leaves me. In the same instant, his bent and wasted limbs grew shapely and sound. The hue of health overspread his ashen face, and light came to his eye. He threw down his staff and drew himself to his full height, then turned and entered the temple with the quick, firm step of a man still in his prime. Let us follow him, said Eurydice softly. He goes to render thanks to Apollo. And she led Orpheus within the holy place. Thus was the king's daughter out of the north betrothed to the woodman's son. On the morrow they set forth with the old king for his own city in Thrace, and if they had been well pleased with each other at their first meeting, every day of their long journey brought them deeper content, until they had no wish in the world but to be always together, as long as they both should live. And now Orpheus perceived that the teacher, whose speedy coming Calliope had foretold, walked with them unseen, and that the name of him was Love. Now, since the road to Thrace passed through the mountain country of Pieria, the travelers encamped one night on the outskirts of the oak forest where Orpheus was born, and he longed greatly to see Calliope and tell her of his new-found joy. When all slept, he took his lute and stole into the moonlit woods, for he thought that she must have foreseen his coming, and perhaps would meet him there. Presently he lost the paths he knew of old, and wandering perplexed, came suddenly upon the enchanted glade. The 9 sisters, seated beside their well, looked up smiling as he drew near, and Thalia cried, "Lo, our minstrel returns to us with joy, bearing the voiceful treasure of Apollo. Now shall he tell us of that yet rarer gift which the Lord of all minstrelsy bestowed on him in holy Delphi. Speak, Orpheus, have you not a sweeter story for us than we ever told you in the days that were?" "Ah, ladies of song," said the youth, "well I know you read my inmost heart, but what is written there I lack words to utter. Mortal speech is all too harsh and poor." "Then sing to us, Orpheus," cried the sisters, and Calliope said, "Take your lute, my child, and let music say for you what no words can. Sing as that master has taught you, the mysteries of whose art the gods themselves desire to look into." So Orpheus touched the lute and sang of his human love to those bright immortals. Tears dimmed the eyes of Calliope as she listened. Across the serene faces of her sisters flitted a shadow of vague regret. Almost it seemed they envied for an instant an uncomprehended bliss revealed to them in that earthly song. Only Urania sat unmoved and aloof, her clear, steadfast gaze fixed upon the heavens. She alone repaid the minstrel with neither smile nor sigh when the lay was done. And this not a little chilled his ardent mood, for in singing of his Eurydice he had felt within him a passion and a power unknown before. His thoughts soared high on strong wings of melody. Now, surely, by grace of Love the Master, he had attained at last. Urania drew softly near him, where he stood with downcast looks. "Dear singer," she said, "be patient as I, who have waited so long, and still must wait. For all the beauty and the wonder of it, there yet lacks something to this song of yours. A mighty minstrel is Love, but there is another of whom you are to learn one lesson more. Know, Orpheus, that Love, the heaven-born, has an earthly twin, and wheresoever Love is, his brother will come ere long. Unbidden, he will sit at your marriage feast. His still voice will whisper to you in the crowning hour of your joy. This is the teacher, the framer of subtlest harmonies, who will lead you by ways that you know not to music's utmost goal." "Love's twin brother," murmured Orpheus dreamily. "I have no guess what his name should be." "Seek not to know it now," answered the star-crowned muse. "Soon enough will it be familiar to you as a friend's. And now we part, for dawn is rosy in the east. See, yonder sparkles the morning star. Be that your pilot, and as you leave this glade, look not behind you, else never more must you return." With that, all the 9 rose up as if to depart also, waving their hands in farewell. Calliope, all this while, had sat with face averted. She cast one sad and loving glance upon her son, kissed his forehead, and turned silently away. He durst not linger, but fixed his eyes on the pilot star and walked straight onward, heavy at heart. So strange a cloud seemed to have fallen over the radiant sisterhood. Never before, he remembered, had he visited the happy glade without hearing their sweet bird notes as he came or went. Never before had they been thus silent, looking on him with eyes that seemed for once to reflect the shadow of mortal care. But of all this he said no word to Eurydice, and in the light of her presence the vague fear that oppressed him was soon forgotten. Long as was their road, these lovers could have wished it longer, so sweetly passed the days, so blithe and free their wayfaring life under the open sky in the green part of the woodlands. This is the life for me, the king's daughter would say. Till now I have lived between sleeping and waking, shut in by palace walls. Would I had been born a beggar maid, and you had loved me in my rags, that we might wander the fair world over, you and I together. The journey ended at last in the strong-walled city of the king beside the swift river of Hebrus. Forthwith he made a great feast for all his folk in honor of his homecoming, and proclaimed to them the miracle of his healing and the will of the god at Delphi concerning Orpheus and Eurydice. Tomorrow eve, said he, my daughter shall be wedded, and you shall all fare yet more sumptuously at the marriage supper. So on the morrow the whole city kept festival, and toward evening the menfolk, high and low, flocked to the palace gate, where the young boys and maidens were already assembled in several choirs, the maidens bearing baskets of flowers, and the boys on lighted torches, ready to escort bridegroom and bride. For the king had given his daughter a fair house in a meadow without the city wall to dwell in during the summer heats, and this she chose for her new home. When the wedlock rites were done, and all the guests had eaten and drunk their fill to the joyous sound of harps and flutes, Eurydice came forth, led by her father, and the fresh voices of the choirs raised the marriage hymn in sweet alternate strains. At that signal a chariot was brought near, drawn by two milk-white steeds. Orpheus mounted it and took the reins. The old king placed Eurydice beside him, bidding them set onward with good luck. Now as they went, the chanting maidens scattered their flowers before the chariot, and the youths walked on either hand, but in dismal silence, for their torches, newly kindled at a coal from the marriage altar, burned blue and flickering through clouds of livid smoke. And all who saw it shook with fear, knowing the signs of weal or woe given by the torches that light home a bride, and that she only is happy for whom they burn clear and steady. But a direr portent followed, as the boys waved the torches to and fro, striving to fan their dying flame. The last dull sparks went out with a hissing sound, and showers of amber drops fell from the blackened pine brands. A cry of horror burst from all the bridal train. The torches weep! O blessed gods, be good to us in this dread hour! Orpheus turned deathly pale, and his hand trembled upon the reins. Courage, my husband, murmured Eurydice, and throwing back her gold-broidered veil, she looked him in the eyes. Her face was wan as his own, but she smiled and calmly said, Let us go forward, beloved. While you are with me, I fear no evil. So they came darkling with all their retinue to the house prepared for them. The mead round about the homestead was wet with dews of night, and Orpheus would have borne his bride in his arms to the portal. But she said gaily, Nay, I am lady here, and must lead you by the hand to this house of mine. Yet for the custom's sake you shall lift me across the threshold, if you will. With that she led him through the shadows towards the lighted porch, whispering that now at last they were come home. But as they reached the threshold, her foot slipped upon something in the deep grass. An angry hiss rose from the ground, and with a faint, shuddering moan, the bride sank lifeless in her bridegroom's arms. They saw on her little foot the print of a serpent's fangs, and knew that hope was vain. Then, when he had bidden the rest depart, Orpheus crossed that threshold with his frail burden, and laid it on the marriage couch, and kneeled beside it, pressing the white cold cheek to his own. And ever and again his cry went up in the dark house, "Eurydice, Eurydice, come back one little moment. How could you leave me with never a word, never a look, on this night of all nights?" End of The Bridal of Weeping Torches. Read by Mark Harrington, Framingham, Massachusetts.